Fellow Falcoholics, what is up? Welcome to episode 82 of the Falcoholic Live. I am, of course, your host, Kevin Knight, at Falcoholic Kevin on Twitter, joined once again this evening by Evan Birchfield, at Evan Birchfield. Maybe your correct at should be at Matt Bryant's biggest fan because, as you guys know, if you followed Evan on Twitter at all, he has been pounding the table for the return of Matt Bryant, and he was correct in the end, so we're going to give Evan a little bit of time to talk about that. But otherwise, guys, we're going to be getting into the roster a little bit, talk about the folks that ended up making it, the folks that didn't, and then, of course, talk about Week 1 and how we're feeling about this Falcons team going into it. But before we get started, Evan, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing great. I appreciate you having me back on. Matt Bryant's back, and all of a sudden, that for some reason seemed to be the biggest hole we had throughout the preseason. So now that hole's kind of filled right as we're ready to start the regular season. So I think we're all ready to go.
Yeah. Yep. I am excited. I know you're excited. So let's jump right in. We got to start with the Matt Bryant news because it's pretty big. We saw Giorgio Tavecchio. I think we talked about it last time you were on. I think it was 2 weeks back. About how close Tavecchio was to winding up off the team, and of course we saw him miss another field goal, this time a short one, in that final preseason game, and that was it for Tavecchio. The Falcons brought in Matt Bryant for a workout the very next day, and by the end of the weekend, Matt Bryant was signed. So, Evan, why don't you give us your thoughts on this signing, and tell us about how right you were calling for Matt Bryant from the very beginning.
Yeah, for those who don't follow me on Twitter, I've pretty much, I think like February 6th or something,
yeah.
They released him randomly. Leading up to it, some people kind of hinted at it, but it wasn't really expected. I don't think it kind of just came out of nowhere. And then it happened, and it just didn't sit right with me because, and I know a lot of the people watching or, who are Falcon fans in general have that, connection with Matt Bryant because you're so used to his, anytime Matt Ryan pretty much got us in the field goal range, Matt Bryant was always there to save the day. And that doesn't matter if it was regular season or playoffs or whatever. Everybody remembers the Seattle kick. I actually shared on my Twitter the other day. It's, you can't watch it as a fan and not get chills from it.
Mm-hmm.
Just a great moment, and he had a lot of people were throwing around that he was, because he had the hamstring injury last year, which he ended up coming back and, kicking a game-winning field goal in Week 17 against the Buccaneers. But a lot of people were pretty much speculating that it was injury-related, the reason he wasn't on a team yet. But he, came out and said he spoke with 5 teams. You can pretty much, guess based on who's desperate at kicker, who those teams were.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it's great to have him back on the team. You feel bad for Tavecchio. I have nothing against Tavecchio. It's just you get so used to, as I said, Matt Bryant being back there that now it's like, oh, we have this other kicker. And then you see the team bring in Blair Walsh after Tavecchio struggles. And I think that just upset more and more fans. And then, and then the team kind of put out a thing, this was the plan all along, which, I mean, sure. But
yeah, sure, guys.
Didn't it? I think it ended up costing them more money. So that's a weird move. I'm not sure how much, but I'm pretty sure it costs them more money if they plan this.
Yeah.
But I'm just, it seems like all is right with the world. It would have sucked to go into the season with Tavecchio or Blair Walsh being the kicker. But now Matt Bryant's back. Everybody's healthy. Dan Quinn's calling the defensive plays. It's hard not to really be excited right now. And we have football tomorrow. So
yeah, real football that counts.
Mm-hmm. That counts.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right on Bryant. I mean, going into the season with Tavecchio, even if he hadn't missed that last kick, he was basically already out of favor with the fan base. You could tell that he was shook mentally. I mean, I feel for the kid because it is a tough spot to come in and just try to replace someone, as beloved by the fan base as Matt Bryant, and he didn't succeed in that, and I don't necessarily blame him. I mean, it's a tough job to do, and kicking in the NFL is a lot harder than people think. So I hope he winds up on his feet elsewhere. But the Falcons needed to get a reliable kicker back in here, and it was just too perfect, for Matt Bryant to come back. Like he was available. Obviously, I don't know the details of that. I know you're a little bit more plugged into that situation, but there was buzz earlier in the offseason that maybe Tampa Bay was interested in signing him. That never materialized. Bryant never really caught on anywhere else, and he just happened to still be available. So it just worked out well for the Falcons. I'm glad the two sides were able to kind of swallow their collective pride and get this union back, get the two sides back together for this happy reunion, because I think the way it ended with Bryant, it didn't sit well with him, and it didn't sit well with a lot of fans. Definitely you and me as well. But I'm hoping now we can get a more amicable resolution when Matt Bryant does finally retire. I think the Falcons may have learned their lesson on that front, thankfully. So I'm much more confident in the kicking situation, obviously, with Bryant. I mean, the only concern to me is that the potential, he's older and he's more likely to get injured, so the Falcons need to have a speed dial option available if Bryant has to miss any time. But at the end of the day, I would trade a 90% field goal kicker for a potential missing a couple weeks of injury. I'd trade that any day of the week. I mean, you just take that. It's so hard to find, and the franchise legend that he is, it's just so nice to have him back. So yeah, I want to give a shout out to the folks in the chat. Solera Vestora, always representing. Tyler Raines, Devin Siege, Don Emery, everybody. I'm sure I missed some folks. Sorry about that. Vlad, it's good to see you again. We're happy to have you guys back here to finally talk about some football that counts. It is that time of the season. So before we jump into too much of week one, because we're gonna have a hearty part of the episode dedicated to that, I do want to touch on this final roster, because we did see a few changes over the weekend. No terribly surprising cuts overall. I know the biggest, most controversial part of the roster was probably the fact that they initially kept fullback Ricky Ortiz in addition to 5 running backs for a total of 6 backs. And that was pretty surprising to people. The Falcons then reached an injury settlement with Ortiz and signed another fullback, Keith Smith, who fans seem to be a little bit more excited about. So that's a good place to start here with this running back / fullback room. What are your thoughts on that running back group that the Falcons have, and do you think keeping the fullback is a good idea? Is it necessary? Do you like Keith Smith better than Ortiz? What are your thoughts on that kind of situation?
Yeah, so Keith Smith spent some time in Oakland, I believe, but more people are aware of him for being, the fullback leading the way for Zeke for a couple years in Dallas. I mean, he's experienced, so, it's a move. I don't know. I guess they've talked about having Ollison back there maybe later on, because, I mean, he did a fair job when they did have him back there at fullback. And then they did have Jaden Graham, the tight end, play a little bit too. So you could tell they weren't as confident in that spot as they probably would have loved to be. And then Keith Smith, I'm assuming the Raiders cut him. I really didn't pay attention to how he became available.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that wasn't a bad move. The one guy I was kind of hoping would pop onto the practice squad was Tony Brooks-James. He was, I think, our leading rusher during preseason. But in that final game against the Jaguars, he had that 52-yard touchdown. I think throughout the preseason he averaged 7 yards or more a carry.
Yeah.
Just kind of looked the part, and I believe he ended up on Tampa's practice squad, so that kind of sucks. But he had a lot of promise, I thought. But aside from that, I have no problem with the running back group. I just don't see who you would have felt comfortable, getting rid of, because you weren't going to let Ollison, you weren't going to release him, because that's the thing. A lot of people think it's just you just throw them on practice squad, but they have to be released. Teams have to not sign them, and then they can go on practice squad. So it's You're not going to get rid of Ito. You're not going to get rid of Brian Hill after the good preseason game he had. Preseason he had. Allison, you weren't going to get rid of. And then Barner's even though he probably had like 2 carries during the preseason. He's a running back, but not really. He's just like that return specialist. So
yeah,
I think it was kind of like one of those spots where they wanted somebody else to, like Marcus Green, for example, who's now with Philly. They wanted him to be the kick returner, punt returner, or whatever, and he just looked awful. So, like, they were forced to keep Kenyon Barner on the roster where nobody else really stepped up to the plate, so it was kind of his to lose, and he kept it. So, but no, I have no problem with the running backs. Devontae Freeman should finally get a bulk of the carries because, when we had Tevin Coleman, they kind of would split a lot. So,
yeah, and you're absolutely right. Like, it's a lot more complicated to get players onto the practice squad, and it often does involve a fair amount of luck. With teams, first they go on waivers, assuming that they're a drafted player or an undrafted free agent, and then if no one claims them on waivers, then you have to be able to sign them to the practice squad. And if anyone wants to sign them to their active roster, that would take precedence over the practice squad. They're essentially a free agent while they're on the practice squad. They're just in your building in the meantime. So you're right. Like Allison, they weren't going to end up cutting him, assuming he looked good at all because of the recent draft pick. Brian Hill looked too good to move on from. And then I think a lot of people were getting hung up over the Kenyon Barner being kept, 5 running backs. Who keeps 5 running backs? I mean, he's the returner. Like, they said they would be willing to keep 7 receivers if the last receiver was a returner. They basically were setting it up for this. Like, that spot is for the best returner, with Marcus Green kind of falling on his face and Olamide Zaccheaus, who we'll get to, muffing some punts. Barner was basically the most reliable option and the one that looked the best so far. So he got that spot kind of by default. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily be shocked if the team, moves one of these running backs, like not Allison, but possibly Brian Hill, if a team is willing to offer something, somewhat substantial, like a 5th-round pick or higher, or something like that. Some team is really needing him at some point in the season, and they're comfortable with, Ito Smith and Allison, and Freeman stays healthy. That's not out of the question, but I think they like all of those running backs, so it's a nice problem to have going into the season. Let's see. I just mentioned Olamide Zaccheaus. I think he was one of the more surprising players to make the roster, one of the only undrafted free agents to make it. He made it along with Justin Hardy, and that included the usual 4 suspects, which obviously are Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley, Mohamed Sanu, and Russell Gage as the top 4. Then it was Hardy and Zaccheaus that ended up making it. Were you surprised at all to see Zaccheaus end up on the 53, or was he someone that you had kind of pegged in there?
That 6th spot was pretty interesting because it's like we knew, Julio, Sanu, Calvin Ridley, Gage in the limited action he had flashed, so he earned that spot. And then Justin Hardy, he did enough to where, some people were pretty much saying they should get rid of him and stuff, but he did enough to, secure that 5th spot. I think he did enough for the 6th spot. I don't see who you would have, kept on instead of him. But he earned it. I have no problem with Zaccheaus making the roster. He was, I believe, Bankert's wide receiver at Virginia, wasn't he?
Yeah, I think for at least a year or 2, yeah.
Yeah, so the team, was obviously familiar with him. I don't know if it's because when they watched Bankert, they saw him. I know they liked Christian Blake a lot, and he ended up on practice squad. But yeah, no, I'm fine with him making the team. I think he did enough, and he shows some promise. But hopefully it's not like it really matters a whole lot because we have Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley, Mohamed Sanu, and Russell Gage, who looked outstanding this preseason. So,
yeah,
good reserve player though.
Yeah. I mean, I don't expect him to see more than a handful of snaps a game. The Zaccheaus keeping him was a little bit of an interesting move to me because a lot of times we've seen the Falcons really prioritize special teams with that final receiver spot, which is why I think some people thought maybe Christian Blake had the leg up because Blake was playing a little bit more on coverage teams and stuff like that. And Dirk Cutter had praised him for his special teams ability. So to see the Falcons actually keep like the most impressive receiver of the bunch, it was a little bit of a surprise to me, at least, but a surprise that I like. And I think the team kind of understands, like, you know, they're in a little bit of a precarious situation in 2020. Like Mohamed Sanu's contract, it's not really something that they can afford next year. So assuming they can't work something out with Sanu, they're going to need, you know, people to step up. And maybe that can be Russell Gage, but then that requires, you know, depth behind Gage to step up. So, you know, hopefully this is a move that will pay off a little bit further down the line when we see, hopefully, Zacchaeus take on a more prominent role in the future and perhaps eventually become the returner. He's definitely got that dynamic return ability. He just seemed like it was a little much for him coming into his first NFL camp to also return punts. So I do like his potential, and I know a lot of folks were kind of salty that Hardy ended up making it, but look, like Hardy, he's a reliable receiver you can play that's not going to like sink your offense. He knows all the routes. He can run them all. He's got reliable hands. He's been better than his best play has really come in the red zone. And as your fifth wide receiver, I mean, that's fine. Like if one of the big three of the Falcons receivers goes out, having someone like Hardy that can step in, and he's not going to elevate the offense. He's not going to like add value to his touches necessarily, to steal a fantasy phrase there. But he's going to be able to run the plays that the offense needs and keep the offense running. So that I'm fine with that. We know he can play special teams. Like it's all good to me. But yeah, definitely one of the most competitive battles in training camp was that wide receiver battle. So they got, like you said, Christian Blake ended up getting stashed on the squad. And then they also brought in another receiver. I believe it was from the Giants or the Broncos or something, Brandon Powell, who has also got some experience at returner. So he could be a guy that they're checking out for the future as well on the squad. Another really interesting spot on the offense was that tight end position, where the team did in fact part ways with veteran Logan Paulson, keeping only 3 tight ends and elevating second-year undrafted player Jaden Graham to the active roster as the third tight end. What are your thoughts on Jaden Graham making this team and being that third tight end?
Yeah, I mean, with the exception of Jermaine Grace on defense, who we'll talk about later, Jaden Graham is the offensive standout. Russell Gage, as I said, did really well on offense too, but Jaden Graham earned his spot. He just, I mean, every game he was making plays. You could tell they really wanted him on this roster just simply because when Ortiz went down with that, was it ankle injury or whatever?
Yeah.
They had Graham come in and play fullback. So, like, I don't know, I'm just speculating. I don't know whose idea it was, but I'm sure they were like, hey, you want to play fullback? And he's like, sure, because I want to make this roster. You love to see guys out there playing different positions to try and make the team, and, he was rewarded for it. I think what a lot of people remember is that where he hurdled that dude during the preseason, and that was like, I mean, if you jump over another human being, I think you deserve to be on the roster. Yeah. I'm happy for him though. Definitely, he's in a good spot too. That tight end 3, spot is he's going to learn but also grow. And he's not going to be forced out there, but I'm sure he'll be out there for some plays. Alex Gray, I was hoping to see do more this preseason. I don't want to say he didn't get the opportunity because he wasn't out there a whole lot, but I don't know. Because for those who don't know, he's from England. Yeah. And I think he played rugby or something. But he was a part of the NFL had a international program where basically you got to be on the practice squad for 2 years of I think NFC South teams. And it might have expanded, but basically he got to be on the practice squad for 2 years, learn, be at practice. But he was the 11th man because you're only supposed to have 10. So he was the 11th man. He didn't count, but he also could not be on the roster. Well, This year, it was like he paid his dues or whatever, and it was lifted to where he could make the roster. I believe I saw they released him. He was one of the cuts, but it was like an injury settlement. So I don't know if something else was going on there.
I believe he has reverted to IR officially.
Okay.
So he is, he could be stashed. I don't know. I suspect that they'll just leave him on IR. They could try to do a settlement with him if he wants to try to play elsewhere. But that's where he's at right now.
Yeah, and I mean, he's probably okay with it just because he's so comfortable with the team. I mean, you go to a foreign country and you're part of that, not to be cliche, but the brotherhood for 2 years, learning this new sport, you're probably going to be okay with, I'll wait a little longer. And hopefully, if they keep him around next year, he gets another shot at it. It's just he wasn't out there a whole lot, and I think he deserved more of a opportunity. But Jaden, I mean, you're not going to remove Luke Stalker. You paid him too much. Austin Cooper's clearly the starter, and Jaden Graham earned his spot. So you're not caring for, just to have Alex Gray. So, I wish the best for him. But Jaden Graham, to answer your question, definitely deserved that third tight end spot.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was always going to be an uphill battle for Gray, coming over from rugby. He was definitely a big rugby star in England, and seems like a super nice guy, and I'm glad he's been able to stick around with the team for as long as he has. But at 28 years old and have never really played an actual NFL down in terms of a real regular season game, it was always going to be an uphill battle for him. We'll see, potentially next offseason if he can make a mark, but with Jaden Graham basically being the most impressive offensive player of the preseason, he led the team in receiving altogether. It was going to be really, really hard for Alex Gray to make it with that going on, and I'm really excited to see what Graham can do, because we saw Eric Saubert basically play like the Invisible Man for 3 seasons. Just never really able to make an impact on the field. He did eventually wind up on the field as a blocker, which I thought was really surprising, because that was the one thing he couldn't do coming out of college, was block. He ended up turning into like a serviceable blocker, but never really was able to get it together as a receiver. Jaden Graham, that was what he did in college, was block, and it seems like he's a really natural receiver. So, I'm interested to see what happens there if he gets any significant run with the offense. And I think, he can block too. So to be able to dig up an undrafted guy and have him contribute for you, that's always a plus. All right. So that is the tight end position. Nothing really interesting going on with the quarterbacks. Matt Ryan's going to be the starter. So if that's controversial to you,
Well, Edling. Well, we can talk about Edling for a second.
Yeah, he did make the practice squad. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was at the Jaguars game last Thursday, and for those who didn't watch the game, maybe, for those who did watch it, they probably witnessed it, but he's very athletic. That's my biggest takeaway. You can see why before the Patriots got rid of him, they moved him to wide receiver, because he's definitely an athlete, totally different from, Matt Ryan's an athlete for what he is, but Etling, good pocket awareness, good running ability. If he could get a lot better at throwing the ball and stuff like that, but he had a solid week 4 game, and I think that's week 4 game, and that's why they wanted to get him back on practice squad, and they were able to, so that worked out for everybody. I think next year it'll be interesting, with Bankert coming back healthy. We're going to have a good quarterback battle next year. That's my big takeaway.
Yeah, I'm excited to see Kurt Benkert come back and really get hopefully a full shot at it. Etling ended up looking a little bit better than anticipated over the course of his 2 games. What he does offer the team, which I think is very valuable for the practice squad, is he can replicate that running quarterback skill set on scout team. The Falcons play a lot of mobile quarterbacks. We know they play Breeze twice. They're going to play Jacoby Brissett. They're going to play Kyler Murray. They're going to play Russell Wilson. I mean, they're going to need Etling.
Mariota, I think.
Yeah, Mariota as well. You're right. So, having a quarterback on scout team that can replicate that running ability, no offense to Matt Schaub, it's not going to be Schaub. So that's an added bonus, I think, to keeping someone like Etling, and we'll see if he ends up developing into anything. But I was encouraged by what we saw from him at the end of the final preseason game, I should say. That was nice to see that he got a little bit more comfortable in the offense and looked like he could sling it a little, which I was into that. All right, finally with the offensive line. I mean, I think if you had penciled in the offensive line, I know I did. I penciled in the 9 starters like in April or right after the draft. I knew who the nine guys who were going to make the roster were. But the starters are still up in the air according to reports this week. Who do you expect to see start at right tackle and left guard when the dust clears on Sunday?
Yeah, so when the Falcons released the depth chart or whatever for the game, James Carpenter and Jamon Brown say or between them. So, like, they still didn't know. And then, as you mentioned, they had, I think it was Gunno and McGarry. So I guess that means McGarry could technically still start, which a lot of people didn't expect. You know, there was a lot of people saying he wouldn't be even close to start until week 4. So this is kind of a new thing. For me, I'd like to see him go. I mean, McGarry looked terrific against the Jaguars. He was getting media attention nationally from like Brian Baldinger of NFL Network did like a little video on him, and you know, he looked great from what you'd expect for somebody, you know, in the first round being in their first NFL action. So like I want them to kind of ease him in. You know, if Gano comes out and struggles, and by struggle I mean Matt Ryan's pretty much like eating dirt the whole time. Throw him out there because why not? But yeah, and then at the left guard position, I mean, I'm a big fan of Jamon Brown. He's a good dude off the field. But so that's who I mean, I guess that's what gives me the lean, and that, you know, that's not fair to Carpenter. He's probably nice too, but yeah, I'd go Brown right now.
Yeah. I mean, we may have talked about it before. Like the team has a lot of incentive to make Brown the starter eventually, but they do have that, you know, James Carpenter, the much more experienced veteran, the better pass protector. I wouldn't be shocked if, you know, Carpenter ended up starting in that scenario, but it seems like it's still 50-50. We'll see. I think that one's more up in the air. I think we will see Matt Gono at right tackle on Sunday, but I mean, McGarry could come in at any time. Like he could be in there in week 2. He could be in there week 3. I mean, I don't think it'll be long necessarily, but I mean, the best case scenario is that Matt Gono comes in and plays really well, and then you can just wait until you know McGarry's 100% ready or close to it, and then you put him in. And then you know if McGarry struggles, you got Gono ready to go.
And I think Gono's the only one who was on the injury report they released today, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Like the only player on it. I don't know what exactly his injury was. So.
No, and as far as what we've heard is that no players are presumably going to be held out. It could, you know, since it's an official injury report, they have to list any reduced practice reps they have to list for gambling reasons. So it's, you know, I'm not overly concerned at this point, but yeah, I mean, I don't think we're going to see Sombrilo, to put that plainly. I think he pulled a Tavecchio and basically cannonballed his chances at starting. So sorry for that. Sorry, Sombrilo. You're gonna, you know, probably have to sit behind an undrafted guy and a first round rookie. So, you know, I expected more, but you know, what can we really say about that?
He looked bad though in games.
He did.
I mean,
he looked awful.
It was his to, you know, lose, and he did. He lost it.
He lost it. That's for sure. All right, moving to the defense. I'm trying to think with the defensive line. I mean, nothing overly surprising with the guys that made the roster. You know, Deidrin Senat, there was some buzz that like, oh, Justin Zimmer's going to make it over Senat. I always thought that was BS, so Senat making it didn't surprise me.
I think Senat, like, if there was any doubt, won it in I think it was week 3.
Yeah.
When he, you know, the tack interception that, you know, Jack rightfully is getting credit for it, but Senat, you know, caused that interception because he came in and drilled, I think it was Case Keenum or somebody. And the ball basically just fell into Tack's lap, and he took off running.
Yep.
But that was a Senat play. He definitely earned that spot. I mean, I do like Justin Zimmer and stuff, but yeah, he definitely earned that spot. But Justin Zimmer's on practice squad, so it's basically the best of both worlds. So.
Yeah, they were able to get Justin Zimmer on the practice squad. Also, Austin Larkin, who I think a lot of fans were worried about the team potentially losing. He was arguably the most impressive defensive player overall, you know, very productive pass rusher, made some plays as a run defender. On the edge, he made it to the squad as well, so the Falcons didn't have to say goodbye to either one of those players. Does look like Durant Miles, however, is gone for now. So, you know, I know a lot of fans liked him as well. But they were able to keep also Jacob Tuati Mariner, who the coaching staff seems to really like. They kept him around last year as well on the practice squad. So some intriguing depth there for the Falcons kept on the practice squad. They'll have some quality guys available if anything unspeakable should happen, which we'll just, we're just going to not talk about that. Moving on to linebacker. Again, I didn't think there was anything super surprising about linebacker. The usual suspects obviously made it with Deion Jones, Devondre Campbell, and Foyesade Oluokun. And then the two other guys to make it were Jermaine Grace, who definitely earned his spot. I mean, he was the best linebacker on the field in the preseason. And then Duke Riley, I think, regained his spot with a strong finish to the preseason after basically being invisible over the past few seasons or worse. So what are your thoughts on that linebacker group? Are you confident in those guys going into the season?
Yeah, I mentioned him at the top of the show. Jermaine Grace was pretty much a big standout. He had, I believe, 2 interceptions for touchdowns, but the one came back because of a penalty. But, I mean, he just looked the part, and, it's a great story because he was with the Falcons, and then they got rid of him to keep, I think, Sean Weatherspoon at the time.
Yeah.
And he bounced around. He went to, I think, the Seahawks and the Colts and maybe the Browns.
Yeah, the Browns as well. Yeah.
And, now he's back in Atlanta and, looks great. So it's kind of hard to, and he's got stuff to work on, obviously, but he definitely earned the roster spot he got. So I'm happy he's on the roster. And Duke Riley did earn it there towards the end. But yeah, I have no problem with the linebacker. That's the thing. This year, it seems like we don't really have a lot of problems on defense, which is weird because there's usually something to pick apart. But, I mean, even the defensive line has looked good, as we were talking about. So
Yeah, it's been very encouraging overall, that's for sure. And I'm really glad Jermaine Grace ended up back with the Falcons. I think he probably should have made it that year. They kept Sean Weatherspoon. I think, they just felt like they were a little bit more comfortable with Weatherspoon.
But he's a good locker room.
Yeah, he is. He definitely has that veteran experience. And it was a very young linebacker core at that point, like extremely young. So I understand wanting the veteran there. But I'm glad he's back, and he's definitely earned it. Moving on, corner is kind of the same situation. Like, I think you could have basically picked out the 6 corners like right after the draft and been pretty safe, assuming you liked Bleedy Ray Wilson, which I did. But I mean, it's Trufant, Isaiah Oliver, the 2 rookies, Jordan Miller and Kendall Sheffield, Devontae Casey in the slot, and then, like I said, Bleedy Ray Wilson. Anything of note to you there with the guys that made it?
Not really. Sheffield, was like one of the fastest people in the draft. So, I'm glad he made it because maybe they didn't really try him at kick return or anything, did they?
They did briefly at the start of camp, but
did they?
They moved off of that. Yeah.
I just remember he injured his hammy on like a punt return or something, or maybe he was.
Yeah, it was a coverage
on
play,
a punt
I think.
or something. Yeah, punt coverage. But haven't heard anything more about the injury, so I expect he's all healed up now.
Yeah, I agree. So nothing else too impactful there. And then safety being the last one. Again, no real surprises there. Ricardo Allen and Keanu Neal, they made it, guys. Spoiler alert. And then Sherrod Neesman finally getting some respect, it seems, and Kamal Ishmael transitioning back to safety to back up strong. And then a guy who a lot of us thought maybe had a chance to make the roster was Chris Cooper. He ended up surviving to the practice squad as well, so he'll be close at hand. He was the 3rd string slot corner. So if there are any unfortunate injuries, I think we could see Chris Cooper immediately brought back. But any thoughts on that safety group?
No, I think if they could have kept 54, Chris Cooper would have been the guy. I think if you look at the practice squad, he's got probably the better chance of being called up if for some reason, Ishmael or somebody's, comes out and just looks terrible. Chris Cooper was pretty much the surprise because I pretty much assumed they'd keep him on the roster. But I mean, you just hope the guys, Rico and Keanu Neal are so healthy that it doesn't matter who the backups are.
Mm-hmm.
And we haven't heard anything that, makes that seem like that's not the case. So,
Right.
yeah, Sherrod Neesman finally getting a real chance is good too. And, and we always have Kazee, so.
We're in case of emergency.
Like I said,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're good. We're good on defense, and it's weird because it's like you want to pick it apart. But there's really not a lot of issues on defense, which is weird. But.
No, the depth is actually really solid, so I'm excited about that for a change. The pass rush looked good, no matter what string was in. That was a nice change. We're not used to that in the preseason, so that was nice to see. But before we move on to some Week 1 talk, I do want to talk about some of the news we had today, which was that the Falcons did some salary cap wizardry. They converted some of Jake Matthews and Ricardo Allen's base salary from both of their deals into a signing bonus, which freed up about $5 million in cap space for the Falcons. Evan, I wonder why they might need some money. You have any thoughts on that?
To send me and you money, of course.
Oh yeah, those sweet internet dollars. If they want to do that, I'm all ears on that one. But
free up more, please. Julio Jones, perhaps.
Someone named Julio Jones. You might know him. Yeah.
Yeah, you might have heard of him. And that game's only getting closer. So, hopefully something happens very soon. I don't even know where they are really in the process. Everything's speculation, it seems like. I don't know. But, I mean, you hope it's going to get done before the deal. I think the biggest takeaway from this whole thing is the level of class Julio Jones has handled this in. He could have been like a real... Are you allowed to curse on this show?
Yeah, go for it.
He could have been a dick about it and been like, trade me, or, basically the Melvin Gordon situation. I'm not showing up, blah, blah, blah. He's showed up. He's been a Brotherhood member. He just wants to get paid. And then on top of that, his respect for, Arthur Blank. Like, he really trusts him, which is rare in these days where it seems like everybody's, doesn't trust their owner, which, it's well-deserved in many cases. But you can tell they have a special relationship,
Yeah.
Mutual respect, I guess you could say. But, I mean, you can't even, keep going. He's got diva-level talent, but he's not a diva. And that's special, especially in football where, there's so many, the headaches. Like, nothing against Antonio Brown, but that would be a headache if that was on our team. Julio could go to that level of, like, divaness, but he just doesn't. I mean, there's so many people who don't even know what he sounds like. That's because he's so reserved. And he's not out there for attention. You got to believe he's a team first player. And, it's special. It really is. Yeah,
it's a rare thing to have a star player that's so selfless and so kind of focused, I guess I would say. Mm-hmm. Like, and when you're a star player, like, you can do whatever you want. Like, I mean, look, like, I think players should be themselves. They should be able to express themselves and do all that. Like, I don't necessarily have a problem with players, having some antics. It's fun. It's entertaining. It's cool. But at the same time, it is refreshing to see, like, a star receiver not have to be the center of attention all the time. Like, it's just refreshing to me. Like, and Julio is just really the consummate professional. And like you said, like, he trusts the owner, he trusts the team. Like, they said, look, we're going to get you your new contract where it's going to be fair, everyone's going to be happy. And he was like, okay, that's fine. And like, that's all there was. I mean, last year there was the training camp holdout, ended up not being a big deal. And I just think that level of trust is just nice to see from the team and from the star player. And I think that, both sides deserve credit for that. Julio, displaying the trust, and also the Falcons and Arthur Blank for being consistent enough to gain that level of trust from a player, particularly when, he doesn't necessarily have any guarantee that the Falcons don't have to give him a new contract, but he believes that they will. And that level of trust is something that extends to other players, and people around the league can see that, and they know the Falcons aren't going to be – they're not BSing them. They're not taking them for a ride or anything like that. So that I appreciate that from the Falcons front office and leadership, and yeah, hopefully we'll get Julio locked up here long term. At the same time, I mean, do you have any concerns that he's not going to suit up on Sunday?
I mean, I pretty much guarantee. Well, I don't want to say guarantee, but I'm pretty much like 90% sure it's going to be done by Sunday, because if not, it's going to look bad. And if you look at pretend it's Saturday evening, reports come out, oh, Julio's not playing tomorrow. The fans will riot, and they you can just get on any sort of social media post of the official Atlanta Falcons accounts. The comments, it could be an article about Matt Bryant. The top comments always pay 11, pay Julio, pay Jet, whatever. Mm-hmm. The fans, the one thing that's powerful with this organization, it seems like they listen to the fans a lot. I mean, the Matt Bryant thing is, it's like, I was basically a nut by myself being like, hey, bring him back for, during the preseason. Mm-hmm. I mean, the off season. The preseason starts chanking. Everybody is online commenting, hey, bring Matt Bryant back. Hey, they signed Blair Walsh. That comes out. Oh, bring Matt Bryant back. It's like when the fans riot, they, it seems like they actually listen, which isn't always a good thing. But,
yeah. They listen sometimes. Yeah, they listen sometimes.
Pay him.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if they don't pay him, the fans, nobody's going to go. I mean, the more reasonable people will look at it like from a financial standpoint and be like, okay, well, that he's probably asking for a ton of money, which I think it's rumored it's like 20 something.
Someone said 25 million. I mean, I think
25.
Maybe that's what his agent said, and then they started talking. Yeah. Then they started negotiating. But
yeah. Well, they want him to be the highest paid. That's like the goal here.
But 21 would make him the highest paid. So I mean.
Yeah. I mean, for like a week, the way it seems like these contracts keep getting spit out. But I mean, but if they don't pay him, most of the fans are going to look at the team as like the enemy, which, I don't have an opinion on it. I just want him to get paid. I want him to play. So that's between them, and hopefully it's handled and it doesn't even matter come Sunday. So
right. No, you're absolutely right. And, I agree. I agree 100%. Like, I don't expect there to be any issues with that. We saw it was the same thing with Grady Jarrett, right? Like, the time came for them to get a deal done, and they got it done. Like, it was, and everyone was like, "Oh no, it came down to the last minute." But like, that's just how these negotiations work sometimes. Like, people always want to play hardball until there's no more time to play hardball, and then they just get it done. Like, they don't. Julio's agent doesn't want him playing on whatever contract he has now. He wants him to get that new contract before the season starts, and have that security. That's what I would want if I was Julio. And they're not gonna throw away the deal over, oh, I want to be paid $24 million instead of $22 million, a year. That's not going to derail the deal at this point. So I would be pretty surprised if it wasn't done. Even if it's not done, I still expect Julio to play, because I think if it's not done, it's probably that the negotiations are ongoing, and they just needed more time. And I think as long as Julio's camp and the Falcons camp are kind of on the same page with like, yeah, we're still working on it. It's not quite done yet, but it's going to get done. I don't think he's going to hold out. Like, the contract's being worked on. It's not like he's not going to get it. So it's not like the Melvin Gordon situations where the Chargers are like, we're not paying you, so you better get here. And he's like, okay, well, I guess I'm not. It's not that.
Yeah, they base it, the Melvin Gordon thing. They basically all drew their lines in the sand. That's that. Where I think the Julio thing might be a little smoke. Like, oh, he's not playing. Yeah. Where just to try and get in there. And Arthur, we don't know what's happening behind the scenes. Arthur Blank might be getting more involved, Yeah. Because he pretty much gave Julio his word he would get paid. I mean, pretty much we're at a wait and see. It's only Wednesday evening, so we still got, a couple more days. But
yep. Yeah, we will see. All right. Week 1 is upon us. The Falcons open the season at Minnesota, taking on the Vikings. It's going to be a tough matchup. It's a tough matchup on paper. It's a road game to open the season. That's always going to be a tough situation. We've seen the Vikings. Recently they've been a fringe playoff team. They've been a playoff team. Good defense. They've got some quality weapons. Immediately when you think about this game, What are some matchups to you that stand out that you're going to be keeping a close eye on for Sunday's game?
Yeah, so one of the key matchups I think is our offensive line holding up against their defensive line. Daniil Hunter's probably one of the more underrated pass rushers in the NFL. And then on top of that, they have like Everson Griffin, who has been, Pro Bowler, has proved a lot over the years. The other spot I want to look at is our Isaiah Oliver and Trufant against Thielen and Diggs, because I mean they're if you say the Falcons are the best wide receiver duo with Calvin Ridley and Julio, I mean right next to them is Thielen and Diggs, and that's going to be a true test. I know Diggs has a what was it, a hip or something? He was out of practice or something. So I'm assuming at this point, it could change. And he could be out, which would be a shock and would definitely help us because they got rid of Treadwell. And then they signed, I forgot his first name, but Doxson. He was a wide receiver for the first round pick wide receiver for the Redskins a couple years ago.
Yeah.
But he's their next guy up because they got rid of Treadwell. So, yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting. I think it will be good for Isaiah Oliver, who's been, not like he did something wrong, but he's been pretty quiet during the preseason. Nothing, no real news on that. And that's a big deal because, taking over for Robert Alford, who we've been used to for many years, who's now on IR for the Cardinals. But, yeah, I mean, those are the two big things. And I think depending on how it goes, if it doesn't swing in the Falcons' favor, we might lose. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I would say the offensive and defensive lines for both teams are going to be major factors because, the Falcons invested a lot in their offensive line. So did the Vikings, perhaps not to the same extent, but the Vikings, they have the rookie center, Bradbury, who they're hoping is going to help them out. And they've got, they're still struggling at tackle spots. The Vikings offensive line as a whole is pretty mediocre, assuming that the rookie plays well. And the Falcons offensive line is kind of in the same boat where they were, not great last year and they've invested a lot and they hope to get some better play. But yeah, I mean, I think the key to this game is keeping Matt Ryan protected. If Matt Ryan has time, he can carve up any secondary. I don't care who the corners are. If you give Ryan, 5 seconds in the pocket, he's going to make a play. So, that's going to be a big factor. I don't expect Ryan to be comfortable back there, but I think that the offensive line can get it done to the point where he's not like getting creamed every play like we saw in that freaking Jets game. So if we can avoid that, I think we'll be all right. And then on the opposite side, can the Falcons' new look defensive line, can they do the opposite and make Kirk Cousins uncomfortable? Because we've seen what happens when Cousins is under pressure. He's just not a very good quarterback. He really struggles with the pressure. And when he has time, he's pretty good. And like you said, they have some very good receivers. If he has time, Thielen and Diggs are going to get open and they're going to make plays. So it's really going to be up to the Falcons' defensive line. And like you said, the young corner, Isaiah Oliver, to see what they can do in their first real tough action here against a really quality group of receivers. I'm thinking about this game. How important do you think this game, in terms of winning or losing, is for the Falcons season as a whole? Obviously, it's the opening game. You'd love to get a win here. You'd love to have that momentum going into the season. But in the grand scheme, what is your thought on the value of this particular game? How important is it for the Falcons to come out of Minnesota with the win?
Yeah, so I don't have the schedule up off the top of my head. I think our next game's home against Philly, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, those are two tough NFC opponents right off the bat. Minnesota, is underrated on terms of its crowd, too. Like, it's a loud place. They're not going to be, it's not week 14 where they're not making the playoffs, so the crowd's defeated. Like, this is week 1.
Yep.
Everybody's going to be nuts thinking they're, winning the Super Bowl, basically. It's going to be a tough atmosphere. But I mean, it's a very important game. If the Falcons lose, I don't think it's like the end of the world unless they get destroyed, because Minnesota is a very good team. next week, you don't want to start 0-2. That's the thing. If they lose to Minnesota and then next week, they need to win that, especially at home on, I think it's a primetime game, right?
It is Sunday Night Football. So
okay. And then also, I don't think we play outside. Like, we don't play outside or something random until like later in the season. Is that true?
Yeah, I think they play 13 of 16 games indoors in domes.
Yeah, so it's like you want to win as many as you can indoors, and that should benefit us, But yeah, no, I think it's a very important game. Like, you don't want to lose anything, obviously, but nothing's more powerful than starting off with a win, because it doesn't get easier for us. Playing the Colts, I guess. What week is that? Is that week 3?
I think that is week 3. Yes. Mm-hmm.
So when we play the Colts in week 3, that's not, I don't say it's a gimme, but we should win that game. Where if we lose to Minnesota, it makes sense as long as we're not blown out. If we lose to Philly, Wentz is healthy. Like, he's going to be as healthy. He'll probably get hurt later in the season like he normally does. But, to start the season, he's going to be healthy. So you always want to start off winning as much as you can, but you don't want to start off like, what was it, 2015, where we were like 5-0.
Yep.
Just like, so, yeah. But no, I hope we win.
Yeah. Yeah, it would be good to get that win. That would put a lot less pressure on the team in week 2, feeling like they have to win against Philadelphia. Yeah. Because that's going to be a tough game. No matter how you slice it. But I think the Falcons do have a pretty good shot in Minnesota. They could be a potential playoff game, so getting that tiebreaker over them is, potentially quite valuable in the grand scheme of things. Obviously, in week 1, it's kind of early to be looking at like tiebreaker possibilities, but getting that head-to-head win over a potential team that could be competing with you for a wild card spot is big. That could be the difference between making the playoffs or not. So it's an important game, and I think it's more so important because it's going to be our first look at the team, and we want to see them look good. Like, they don't have to win the game. It's not like a must-win scenario. We're not at that point in the season. They can afford to lose a game. They've started a lot of seasons 0-1 and been fine. Under Dan Quinn, like 2017 they lost and then they came back and made the playoffs. This is a team under Dan Quinn that usually finishes strong, so you don't have to necessarily front load a bunch of wins, but it's always nice, to get that first win of the season. And like I said, that head-to-head, that is valuable. So looking at Minnesota and how that team is constructed, I guess. Yeah, I just really want to see the team look, capable, because they don't necessarily have to blow them out, but as long as the Falcons don't get blown out themselves, like, I think I'll be pretty confident. Like, if it's a close game and it comes down to the wire, I'll be happy with that. And like you said, getting that win and then not having the pressure going into that game against Philadelphia, who is probably going to be another high-level contender in the NFC. That could be nice.
Especially on prime time. That's always tough for us, no matter where it's at.
Yeah.
And then not to look ahead, but, you look at, because I picked up the schedule, so, I put it up here. So week 3, we're going to run through basically the AFC South except for the Jaguars. So we go to the Colts, which should be a win. We play Tennessee at home. Then we have to go to Houston, which is, probably the toughest team in that division now that Luck's gone. And then we go to Arizona. So those right there, that's 4 games we should be able to handle. If for some reason we start 0-2, you win those 4, you're 4-2, all of a sudden the season isn't bad and we don't really pay attention to those first 2 games. Yeah. But, I'm just looking ahead. That's like worst case scenario sort of thing where we go 0-2 to start the season. But I think, if we split it, that's perfectly fine. Yeah. If we somehow lost to Minnesota and then we beat Philly and we run the table these next couple weeks, because then week 7 we have the Rams at home, which is going to be very good. And then, Seahawks at home the following week, and then we get a bye week. So we come out of those first 8 games with 3 losses. We're 5-3. I'll take it. I mean, there's some tough opponents there. Nobody's really a cakewalk, but
no. That's the thing about the Falcons' schedule this year is that they don't really have a lot of like cupcake games. Like, I guess you could say the Cardinals, probably a relatively easy game, but outside of that, like, even with Jacoby Brissett, he's probably one of the best, if not the best, like backup quarterback in the NFL. That team is still going to be able to compete, and obviously Houston, they have a left tackle now, so they're not going to be surrendering a sack every other play. And I mean Tennessee, they're not exactly a team that inspires a lot of fear, but they're not exactly a team that scares you in a way, in a meaningful way either. Like, they don't really move the needle; they're kind of just there. So that'll probably be our AFC loss right there.
What's interesting to me is we always seem to struggle with the pass catching running backs. So if Duke Johnson's a starter for the Texans that week, that's going to be very tough. And you just look at the running backs we have to face, like Dalvin Cook week 1, week 2. I guess week 2 we're okay, but that's like Jordan Howard or Miles Sanders, so I'm not really scared of that, because I mean I love our secondary. I think it's supremely underrated, and obviously our defensive lines look great, but you don't know until you're actually out there with your starters, because we've only seen bits and pieces during the preseason, where like somebody like Tyler Davison, for example, would flash. But, like, you got to keep in mind, Deion Jones ain't out there, Keanu O'Neal ain't out there, Ricardo out. So it's not like the full defense, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then week 3, Marlon Mack. Week 4, Derrick Henry. Week 5 is, Duke Johnson, like I was talking about. Like, we have some tough, David Johnson in week 6. Week 7, Todd Gurley. Week 8, I think, is Chris Carson. And then we get a bye week. Like, we're facing some pretty good running backs.
Oh, yeah.
Coming ahead. So that defensive line is really going to need to step up, and I think they will, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and having Deion Jones and Keanu O'Neal in there is such a boost to the run defense. Like, they're just a completely different unit without the physicality of Neal and the speed of Deion Jones, who's kind of their guy that can really match up with those pass catching running backs. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing this defense at full power. We just didn't get a chance to see it outside of like a few quarters last year. And I think they have the potential to actually be a good unit for the first time since 2017, and maybe better than 2017 if we're being honest. So I'm excited to see that. It's going to be a good game, obviously, and I'm very excited in case you guys can't tell. But yeah, is there anything else you wanted to touch on, Evan, before we wrap up here?
No, not really. I think we did a pretty good job covering everything.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, yeah, I did. If you guys don't mind, do throw the video a like and give the channel a subscription if you enjoy the content. We do appreciate that, and I guess those things do help our algorithm.
I guess nobody had fan questions or anything, did they?
There were a few here and there. I guess we kind of naturally answered a lot of them with our commentary.
So,
yeah.
If anybody was saying anything and I ignored it.
No, I usually try to naturally touch on some of the things people are talking about. Perfect. But we do appreciate you guys tuning in. Like I said, if you could hammer that like button, subscribe to the channel if you do like the content. Just so you guys know, we are going to be coming at you with 2 shows on Sunday. So as it is the opening week, we are going to be doing our traditional season kickoff show, probably about the 20 minutes or so before the game goes live. And then Devin Siege, there will in fact be a post-game show. There will be after just about every game this year. The only ones that won't will be the ones that I'm literally at the stadium. So yes, there will be a post-game immediately following as well, and I know about half of you will only show up if we lose. So, I love you either way. We appreciate you guys. But before we officially sign off, do want to thank my guest this evening, Mr. Evan Birchfield, at Evan Birchfield on Twitter. Evan, anything that you're working on that you'd like to plug?
Not necessarily. I'll have, a fantasy article on Friday. And then also today I had a Matt Bryant interview. I got to interview him and ask some questions about, the process during the preseason and stuff like that, which was, it's not a long read or anything. So if you got 5 minutes and you feel like reading, open it up. It's pretty interesting. But yeah, no, I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for coming on. Guys, as always, I'm Kevin Knight at Falcoholic Kevin on Twitter. Tomorrow I'm going to be doing a piece about Jermaine Grace. Friday, it's going to be one of my series pieces. It's going to be players to watch. And then I did something about Olamide Zaccheaus yesterday. So check those out if you're starved for content. But we've always got plenty of that hot and fresh content on thefalcoholic.com. So if you need some of that, you know where to find it. Like someone mentioned in the chat, Solaire, DW and Gina are going to have the Falcoholic podcast. That should post tomorrow. So definitely check that out.
With Randy Havens, right?
I think it might be with Randy Havens, yes. So of Stranger Things fame, big Falcons fan as well. So you're definitely going to want to check that episode out too. Their show's pretty good. I would say it's, it might even be better than this one. I don't know. But, we love those guys, and that's a really entertaining show as well. So definitely check that out. But otherwise, guys, thank you for tuning in. Like I said, we'll be back on Sunday with 2 shows for you, one before, one after. Until then, I'm Kevin. He is Evan. And we will see you guys soon. All right. Have a good night, folks.